This is how we begin, and do stay with me through it all. President Akufo-Addo says he's optimistic about the implementation of the Right to Information law, which will ensure transparency in government and help with the fight against corruption. The president made this statement after he signed the bill into law. It was passed by Parliament after 17 years of campaigns from the media and other civil society organizations. Well, the president spoke earlier when he assented to the bill this morning at the Jubilee House.
Sense of responsibility and commitment to good governance in passing this significant piece of legislation. The purposes of the Act, as set out in its preamble, is to provide for the implementation of the constitutional right to information held by any public institution and to foster a culture of transparency and accountability in public affairs. Properly applied, it should enhance the quality of governance in our country and provide a critical tool in the fight against corruption in public life. The Parliament has quite rightly provided that the Act should come into effect in the next financial year, i.e. January 2020, because there are financial consequences in the implementation of the law, in order to give the public treasury the opportunity to make the necessary allocations to enable the Act to be effective. I'm very happy that this law has finally been passed, and I did make the commitment that when it was brought to me, I would give my assent to it right away. It was in fact brought to me yesterday afternoon. But on second thought, I felt that I should sign it in the plain view of the Ghanaian people, for you to know that this long, winding parliamentary process has finally come to an end. Long live Ghanaian democracy.
That is President Akufo-Addo there, obviously an excited president there about signing this. Well, let's get on the phone now and speak with Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Ibrahima. Mr. Ibrahima, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
A lot of people looked forward to it. A lot of people worked very hard. A lot of people campaigned for it. It is here. We'll talk about the bottlenecks momentarily. But as it has been assented to, this must come to you as welcome news, does it?
Well, it is. And I think that the president and the government deserve the commendation for making sure that the Right to Information bill has now become a law. As we all know, the battle has been on for almost a decade and a half now. We've had governments upon governments promising that they will get it passed. I think it was one of those things that were highlighted in the MPP manifesto for 2016. And at that time, it was indicated that should the bill not be passed by the then Parliament, it will be passed as a matter of urgency when this government comes to power. So having done that, even though not the first year, not the second year, but within the third year, I think that it is something that we must commend the government for doing.
Interesting. Now, the point you made about the fact that this has been a very important part of the manifesto for the NPP is what I want us to dwell on at the moment. Now, certainly, political points scored, and we know that for sure. We know that politicians will always use some of these things, and they will say, we promised and we've delivered, of course. But at the end of the day, it's the implementation that matters. Where do we go from here? From where you sit, how do you see the progression from here? Because we know that there are bottlenecks.
Well, you are absolutely right that what really matters is the implementation. And I say so recognizing that Ghana is not the first country to have such a law. Even as we commend the government, it is important to highlight the fact that, look, other countries around us have done it. Nigeria, 2011, Sierra Leone, 2011, Liberia, 2010, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, Guinea. These are all countries that have, passed right to information law. The question is, has anything changed since the right to information law in these countries came into existence? Has it in any way enhanced governance transparency? Has it in any way, benefited the people? Has it in any way curbed corruption? I think that is the big fight that we have to fight, so that we don't just add on to the pieces of laws that we have in this country on paper, which do not work. Because as many people have said, our problem is not about having good laws. Our problem is about implementing the good laws that we have. I think that the government has a responsibility to ensure that, whatever is required in the law is something that will be implementable. We as citizens also have a responsibility to ensure that the opportunities provided for us in the law, we take full advantage of it. In the meantime, of course, some of us would have wished that once the president accents it, it becomes something that is in force. But of course, Parliament in its wisdom said it has to be delayed until the next financial year, which is January. Well, the good thing about that, I believe, is that it gives us the opportunity to fully prepare. It gives us the opportunity for institutions in government that are holders of public record to begin to document in ways that would be easier for them to release information once requests are made. And I believe that those of us in civil society who have championed this cause over the years, it gives us the opportunity to reflect and to plan properly for the next steps when it comes to implementation.
So as we wait for the next financial year, to what extent are you optimistic that funding, once again, will not be used as a very smart way to delay the implementation of this law?
Well, once the law has come into force, I believe that on the part of government, funding can be an excuse only to the extent of maybe setting up an office and the infrastructure required and so on and so forth. But other than that, once it is law, from January next year, if I need information about the District Assembly's Common Fund, how much has been disbursed to the various assemblies, I'm entitled to it. And I think that the law provides for sanctions for those who would breach the law in terms of undue denial of people who are requesting for information. So government may use funding as an excuse only to the extent that in terms of appointing officers and so on and so forth, the money is not there. But I think that that would not prevent individuals from seeking and being able to receive information from the relevant authority.
It may not prevent individuals from taking, trying to attempting to test the law. But what it does is that it can easily frustrate you, just like a lot of people were frustrated over the bill itself, the law at the time that it was a bill. A lot of people got frustrated over it. So it may not necessarily stop people from going, but it will frustrate you and lead you perhaps to stop.
Well, that's true, but I doubt that would be something that would be much more significant. You see, if there is anything good about how long the law took to get passed, it's about the fact that it got a number of Ghanaians to actually even use the constitutional provision of right to information and go to court to have it affirmed. And even before the passage of the law now, the only thing perhaps the law is adding at the moment is the fact that I don't have to go to court to be able to get the information. Other than that, the Constitution already provides for that. And the law also helps in terms of the specificity, the specifics. That you can do this, you can do that, this is exempt, this is not exempt, and so on and so forth. So yes, if the systems are well set up, funding is not an excuse. It would certainly facilitate the effective and efficient implementation of the law. But even if, it turns out that we don't have the money, we can't appoint the commissioner, we can't do that, I believe that people have already shown that when it comes to accessing information, which is a fundamental right, people are ready to go the full haul.
Right.
Now that we have a law, I'm sure that it becomes even much more easier, even if government decides that funding is a challenge.
Hopefully it does. But for Media Foundation for West Africa, for example, the last time I spoke to people in Kenya has this going. So we sought to take some advice from them about how it's worked there and what we can do here. One of the things they said was that immediately the law is passed, it will be important for people to test it by actually embarking on a pursuit of information. Is the Media Foundation for West Africa one of those organizations that's seeking or that is readying itself to test the law? Well,
if it is required, that is something that we would readily and happily do. But I think what is also important is to empower people to understand the law, to understand their rights within the law, how they can use the law, and where necessary, supporting individuals to be able to actually do what you are saying, which is about testing the law. And we need to also recognize that this is not one of those pieces of legislation that perhaps is more significant only in Accra, which is the capital. I think this is relevant at the district levels, at the regional level, at the national level. And so even the grassroots, I think it's important that we empower people at the local level to know what there is, to request and demand for information on what their resources are being used for, what their local taxes are being used for, how much common fund has been disbursed, how much has come in, and so on and so forth. So I think one of the critical things that we have to do is to empower people to understand it and to know how to take advantage of it. But as organizations that have been at the forefront of the campaign, I think that when it becomes necessary, that we use whatever mechanisms possible to test the implementation of the law, we'll be happy and ready to do that.
I'm sure that you may have touched on bits and pieces of what I'm going to ask you next in all that you've said since I've been asking you these questions, but sum it up for me. What are your expectations of what happens between now and whenever?
Well, given what we've seen in the other countries where we work, we would remain cautiously optimistic in terms of the impact of the legislation on our governance in terms of transparency, accountability, and citizens' rights to access information. As I said before, we have these countries, neighboring countries, all our 3 neighboring countries have had right to information law over the last few years. Not much can be seen in terms of a direct impact of the law on good governance, on transparency and accountability. But I believe that we also have the opportunity to be different. Other countries have elections and there are conflicts and so on and so forth. We've had consistently elections without any trouble. And on many fronts, I think Ghana can be a threat. And I believe that this is one piece of legislation that should help transform our governance system that over the years has not been in the shape that we all wanted.
Mr. Brima, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, for your insightful contribution as well to this conversation. Sule Brima is Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa. On that bill, the Media Foundation for West Africa speaking to us about the latest law, if you like, the Right to Information law, which has been assented to by President Akufo-Addo.